What's up everyone, Dimitri2 here, and welcome to episode 1 of the Ironman challenge. If you haven't seen it already, make sure to check out episode 0 for the rules and explanations of the Ironman challenge. Now before we can even dive into the first mission, we have some choices to make, namely, which warframe and which weapons do we start off with. Now sadly, I do not have any usable footage from my stream, so my apologies for that, so we're gonna have to work with what we have instead. The first choice to make is not a simple one either and shapes honestly the entire start of the game. Which frame do you choose? Every frame has their pros and cons. Normally I would recommend newer players to choose Excalibur, as in my opinion he makes for a very good starting frame. He has a good combination of innate tankiness, ability usage and general versatility. The innate tankiness of Excalibur especially is a stat that is very important for newer players, so I would highly recommend if you're playing on a new account, choose Excalibur. However, for this account, I went with a different frame, and that is Vault. Pros and cons, like I said, can be given for all of the frames, but there was one deciding factor in my choice of Vault. Both Excalibur and Mag can be farmed relatively easily from the star map, compared to Vault, which needs to be researched in the clan dojo. Vault will cost me a lot more time and resources to acquire than either Excalibur or Mag, and that was the deciding factor for me. And when it came to the weapons, the choices were a bit easier, to be honest. In case of the MK1 Bratton versus the MK1 Paris, I went with the Bratton. The MK1 Bratton is a good weapon to have early on and is usable in most situations. The MK1 Paris, in my opinion, fires too slow for the damage that it does, and in my experience as well, tends to get you overwhelmed by the amount of enemies early on in the game. For the secondaries, we have the choice of either the MK1 Kunai or the Leto. My secondaries are going to be an afterthought, as my plan was to focus on primaries from the start. More on that later. However, since I do not plan to use secondaries too much, I personally went with the MK1 Kunai. The main reason for that is that it allows me to do stealth kills early on, allowing missions like Spy to be done stealthily. And lastly, the melee weapons. This one, I have to be honest, was just personal preference. Choose what you will. I chose the MK1 bow over the Skana as I prefer the extra range that the bow gives you, but it's honestly personal preference. Choose what you will. After making the choices on our frames and weapons, we quickly made our way through Vor's Prize and restored most of the ship's functions. With Vor's Prize knocked out, we now could truly start playing on the Ironman. My first goal on the Ironman account was pretty simple actually. Acquire a very early Serration that can carry me through the early game. As almost all of you know, Serration is a mod that increases damage for rifles. It's one of the most vital mods in the game, and getting the mod early on will make my star chart progression a lot easier. My plan on the account is to keep it simple. I'm going to focus solely on warfare mods and primary weapon mods. This way I don't have to spend my endo evenly, and can therefore get my primary mods to higher ranks sooner, allowing me to do harder content sooner as well. Now there are a couple of ways to get Serration early on. In my opinion, the best way to get it would be through Earth spy missions. You can also do excavations and complete the 4 excavators, which is also the way I did them actually. However, if you can do the spy missions on Earth, which are pretty easy to be honest, you can do them a lot quicker and easier than the excavations that I was doing. I personally did the excavations thinking that they had different drop tables from the spy missions and I would need the cryotic later on, but in hindsight, Earth spies are the way to go in my opinion. It took me about 3 hours total to get Serration from the excavations, but once that was acquired, I used all the endo that I had farmed from said excavations to immediately rank it up to rank 6, giving me 105% damage increase. Afterwards I spent about an hour progressing through the star chart. Next up in the list was to make my way over to Venus, and to get there I had to complete the Venus Junction. The Venus Junction has a couple of things that I needed to do on it, namely complete Vor's Prize, which is the first thing that we did on the account, collect 20 mods, which was easily achieved through my excavation farming, apply 4 mods to a single Warframe weapon, there were no issues with this one, upgrade any mod to rank 2 or higher, which was achieved when I upgraded my Serration to rank 6, and defeat 3 Eximus units. This last one is probably the hardest one out of all of these, and I've heard that the mobile defense on Earth has a guaranteed spawn of at least 1 Eximus, though I can't confirm that personally myself. But I achieved my kills through the excavation grind for Serration earlier on. The junction fight was pretty easy to be honest, so afterwards I moved on to Venus. My plan was to farm the resources that I needed to build the Karak, a solid assault rifle for the early game and a definite upgrade over the MK1 Bratton. I finished off the first day by starting up the build and then making my way through about half of Venus or something like it. The next day however, I had big ambitions. Acquire all the parts for Frost and start up his build. Frost itself drops from Lekrill, the boss on Mars. However, another problem was that Frost Neuroptic's blueprint requires neural sensors, the earliest of which can be acquired on Jupiter. Starting on Venus, this meant that I had to go through the entirety of Venus, Mercury, Mars, Phobos, Ceres, and then finally Jupiter. I had about 10 hours to stream that day, so we wasted no time and made our way through the star chart in a hurry. First up was the Mercury Junction. Defeat Jackal at Fossa, which was a relatively easy fight. 10 waves of defense at Tessara, which was a bit of a challenge since objective missions are appearing earlier on. However, that was also completed, mostly through spamming my first ability. Rescue the hostage from the Linnea, which was easily done. And defeat 10 Eximus units, and I think I farmed the defense as well for a while to get this done. Afterwards we made our way over to Mercury. The reason for that is simple. The Mars Junction requires the following stuff. Complete the Once Awake quest, kill Grenier, collect Rubido, and complete Suse on Mercury. The Grenier kills and Rubido farm we had already achieved with the excavations, and the Once Awake quest is acquired from the previous Mercury Junction that we completed. So we did the quest and made our way through Suse, completing that and finishing off the Mars Junction. Once we had arrived on Mars, I made my way over to War and fought Lekrill, and I have to be honest, this boss fight was a gigantic pain in the ass. A lot of deaths happened and I was constantly running out of ammo with my newly built Karak. After a painful 3-hour farming session however, I finally managed to acquire all the frost parts, but I did not have the resources yet to build them, and so we continued on, pushing our way through the star chart. Next up was the Ceres Junction. However, the requirements for the Ceres Junction meant that we also had to complete the Phobos Junction first. And to get to Phobos we had to kill 150 enemies in a single mission on Mars, scan 3 Cephalon fragments and open 3 Lith relics. The 150 enemies in a single mission was done in the defense if I recall correctly. The 3 Cephalon fragments were scanned with the capture missions, and the 3 Lith relics I had acquired earlier from my Serration grind with the excavation. All that was left to do was to run them. Passing through the Phobos Junction, we quickly managed to make our way through the Sergeant on Iliad. However, during one of the missions on Phobos, a very nice thing happened. Stalker showed up. He spawned in as a level 30 enemy, a lot higher than the enemies that I was currently fighting. I was in for a tough fight, but thankfully I was able to cheese him by hiding behind a door and peeking my head out every so often to shoot him. The drop from Stalker was a Dread blueprint. At Mastery rank 1, I had gotten one of the better weapons in the game, a very useful drop, and I already had the resources required to build it as well. More on that later. After we made our way through the Sergeant and killed him however, we hurried back to Ceres Junction with our new bow currently building. For the Ceres Junction we had to do the following. Defeat the Sergeant on Phobos, which we just did. Defeat Lekrill on Mars, which is also something we did earlier. Defeat 300 Arid Greniers on Mars, which we had already done by that time. And refine a Void Relic, which was very easy to do considering the fact that we had to complete 3 Lith relics early on, giving us some extra traces. And now we had arrived on Ceres. Now by this time, I have to be completely honest, my weapons and frames started to struggle at this point. Enemies started to take a long time to die, and my Volt's first ability, which was carrying me up to that point, wasn't one-shotting enemies anymore. I was using all the endo drops from enemies that I could find into my vitality at this point, just to make sure that I could survive, and we slowly but surely made our way through Ceres. For the Jupiter Junction however, we had to do the following things. Complete the Arkwing quest, defeat Vor and Krill at Exta, survive 10 minutes or more on Draco, and defeat a Prosecutor on Ceres. The Arkwing quest took a bit of time, but was very much doable. Defeat Vor and Krill was a pain, but thankfully only had to be done once. I ended up focusing Vor first, using my Volt's first ability to kill off all the weaker enemies, then focus firing on Vor to take him out as soon as possible. Afterwards, it was just a one-on-one fight against a stronger Lekrill, which took a while, but we ended up completing the mission nonetheless. Surviving 10 minutes at Draco, I made sure to back out and retreat whenever I was getting overwhelmed, picking off enemies one by one and barely managed to get through the 10 minutes, but at the end of the day we managed to complete it somehow. Defeating a Prosecutor was easily done to be honest and happened during one of my missions on my way to Vor and Krill. After that, we ended up fighting the Valkyr Spectre on the Jupiter Junction. Now out of all the things that I had to do on Ceres that day, this is probably the hardest one that I had to do. Normally I don't consider these Spectre enemies hard to kill, but holy crap, the Valkyr Spectre was pretty damn difficult to fight, and I was one-shotted by her multiple times. Her gigantic armor values made the damage reduction a pain in the ass to deal with, but how I ended up fighting her was relatively simple actually. I hid behind the pillars and stun-locked her with Volt's ultimate, coming out to unload a magazine of the Karak and then hiding behind the pillar again. I repeated this strategy all the way until she died, but holy crap, it was a difficult fight nonetheless. With Valkyr defeated, however, we made our way over to Jupiter, did the first mission we could find and lucked out with an early neural sensor array. With Frost parts now building, we finished off that day's stream, a big goal achieved so early on. Ended up streaming for about 11.5 hours that day. The final day was a calm day compared to the first two, thankfully. With Frost now building, I had some time to go back and farm all the planets for the new resources that I could acquire now. First up, however, was a stockpile of Forma blueprints. I had thankfully acquired quite a few lith relics from the earth excavations on the first day, and I spent the first few hours farming just Forma blueprints. I'd also set up my dojo already, since the first Forma blueprint was now officially building. All of my Formas for the next few weeks would be going either into syndicates or dojos, because the earlier I set that up, the better. Afterwards, most of that day was spent farming resources and building as many low tier weapons as possible in preparation for the next episode. Overall, it was a very chill day, doing some much needed resource farming and using all my endo on leveling my core mods. Nothing noteworthy happened that day, but it was a very important day nonetheless. And that is going to be it for episode 1 of the Ironman challenge. If you guys have any questions about the Ironman, let me know in the comment section below or visit my stream whenever I'm streaming. I will cover some more topics a bit more in depth in future episodes. As for now, I'm trying to catch up with these episodes to the point where I currently am. And as always, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and a special shout out to all my GameWiz subscribers. I hope to see you guys in the next video, and until then, peace.